The above 500 Pittsburgh Pirates, maybe too good to be true, but it did last a day. The Pirates now back to being 500, not above 500 any longer here. A post-Easter loss for the Pirates as they fall to the Milwaukee Brewers. The land of horrors for the Pirates continues there in Milwaukee. And this is your Pirates post-game show, of course, here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Baseball Now. I am your host, as always, Mike Asti, and I'm going to be joined by a familiar voice and face to this show the last year or so, Mike Persak of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Covers the Pirates among myriad of other things there, but certainly has the ability to talk Pirates with us. And Mike, glad to have you back. Glad to have you back on the show to be able to talk Pirates here in this new season, which maybe you're bad luck for some of our viewers and and fans. We had a streak there going. They do lose after the back-to-back wins, and this, of course, starts a new series of the loss. I do want to start with the starter, though, because we'll get to the bats, and maybe we'll even talk some McCutchen here in a moment. But Zach Thompson, not the same as the first outing. So the first outing, only a couple runs allowed. It was a better outing than this. This one, you have the 5 runs exploded midway through, ends up with the 6 allowed. And obviously, this is somebody they got from Miami. So this is a young pitcher. This is his first go-round with the Pirates. He talked a lot about after his debut outing that he actually had to shake off some nerves. So now you're in your second appearance. It's on the road. Maybe shook those nerves away. But what did you see in comparison to the first outing to this one with Zach Thompson? 6 runs allowed, 4 innings in this one. Going back to April 13th against the Cubs, only 2 runs allowed, 5 hits, that also 4 innings, but didn't give up as much. Was it just one bad inning, just unraveled for him? Anything else you saw with Zach Thompson?
Yeah, it seemed like he was sort of missing his spots at times. He got a little bit uncomfortable there, and what was that, the 4th inning or the 5th inning, whatever that was. A little bit unlucky because he got a sort of a weak fly ball in the center that looked like it kind of knuckled, and Brian Reynolds didn't read it correctly, which rarely happens. And then a long fly ball to right that ended up being a double, I think, whatever it was. That Cole Tucker had in his glove. I mean, it was a tough play, but he had it in his glove and kind of popped out there. So if he gets those 2 outs, Yelich never comes up. I'm not even sure if they would have brought him out for the 5th. And it's a whole different ball game. So taking into account that, but at the same time, even in some of the earlier innings, it seemed like he was struggling to get the first pitch strike in there. Seemed like he was missing some spots. I don't know. There were times where it was also like, because he was a little wild. Yeah. Even the good pitches he was making that were missing the zone, but were designed to get swings. His guys weren't really biting on those either. So I think there were a few different issues that you can point to, but it's also the sort of start where maybe you can look at it and say, well, he also could have gotten out of it. So my mind's not necessarily made up one way or the other on the guy, but definitely not one that he would have liked to have been better, I'm sure.
Yeah, you can't. We certainly can't decide the life story of this man on these 2 outings, but they're just kind of polar opposites, at least in terms of the runs allowed. It does go to that 4th inning that you mentioned there with the 5 that exploded. You take that away, and it's pretty much same type of pitching through these two outings. And he's that unknown factor, but he is a young pitcher and somebody that I think maybe surprised some that, okay, after the first outing, maybe he could kind of be a piece that nobody was factoring in that could maybe be a young pitcher that could stay a while. And then you see this outing maybe allows some pause there. Mike Persak of the PG joining me here. Pirates do lose this one 6-1. They're now back to 5-5 on the year. The Brewers actually get off the snide. The Pirates break a back-to-back winning streak there as they already have a series win in this incredibly young season. In the last couple of years, if you remember, we were doing some of these shows, had you in a lot. We were trying to find, I believe I was asking questions in almost August, are they ever going to win a series? Or how many could they get? Could they get 4 or 5 series wins the whole year? Having one of those under your belt certainly can make Pirates fans feel good. I do have to flip it, though, and this goes to the bats. The offense, which struggled the first week or so of the season, and it really had nowhere to go but up from last year and even the year before, kind of, I don't want to say exploded, but it certainly had been good in recent weeks or in recent games, not weeks. And then you see only the one run in this game and kind of a similar situation where they can't get many on. They don't do much with it. It seemed like an offense that just was never going to get going in this game, kind of stuck in the mud like it was the first week prior to what we've been able to see recently for the Pirates. And this goes prior to this game with only the one run, 5 against Washington, 6 against Washington, and even a couple in the loss to the Nationals, and then 9 the game before. So only one game in the previous 4 did they score less than 5. Then you have this output, and this is that lineup that has Hayes leading off and Vogaball in the cleanup. That's not always been the lineup. Was it just one of those nights the Pirates were due to cool off? Anything Milwaukee's doing, because that's always been a tough place to play for the Pirates, but obviously this is a different group, or even this lineup configuration, because they basically had a few of those, and this one has now seemingly been the least successful, even though it's the most conventional lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this sort of thing's going to happen, right? Like, this seems like more of what we expected, just from the perspective of, like, when you look at especially the bottom of the lineup, there's not consistent offense there. Like they got, taking it back to Sunday, like they got contributions from guys that you probably wouldn't normally expect. Even Josh Van Meter was showing up with his first hit of the season in a big spot. So, like, I don't know, like there were parts of the game today where, like, they had shots to kind of do something with runners on base, but it's tough when you've got, their bottom, I guess they're 6 through 8 hitters. When a combined 0 for 11. So, that's Newman, Marisnik, and Roberto Perez.
Yeah.
And don't
Tucker got a hit there Tucker got a hit. That's the only other one.
Yeah. And you don't expect those guys to be huge offense producers. So that's the case. You really are relying on the top of your line to get it done. They had a shot there too late in the game where Hayes came up. I think it was runners on second and third with 1 out or something like that.
Yeah.
And Hayes can't get it done, and then Reynolds strikes out. So, like, those are the guys that you are really relying on. And when they're not able to come up in those big spots, it's putting, a lot of pressure on guys lower in the order. And so, it is what it is. Like, that's just kind of how it is. But I will say that, like, it feels like the Pirates always get, like, beat up by the Brewers, like, 4th and 5th starters, doesn't it? Like, it feels like last year they ran into, like, Adrian Hauser and Eric Lauer like a million times and just couldn't figure it out. So I don't know. I mean, I without looking it up, I'm sure Eric Lauer's stats against the Pirates are, like, abnormally good given, like, what he normally is.
Yeah, and obviously being in Milwaukee has just been a funky land for anybody wearing a Pirate jersey over the years. Even good years, it ended up being still an issue, and they will be able to have that be something that is not a factor. They will play the Brewers again. The Brew Crew will come to Pittsburgh in about a week, so they'll be able to get some revenge potentially with the start of this series going the way it's been. But you're going not only to a team that's won back-to-back, that is 500 right now, which is better than I think anybody would have thought to this point, even though you don't expect much the rest of the season, but also the comeback win over on Sunday. And then the offense has been there, so that's at least some bright spot. I do want to ask you here, Mike Persak of the PG. Pirates lose this one here as he's joining me here on our post-game show, Pittsburgh Sports Live, and also our game recap is over there at Pittsburgh Baseball Now. Which lineup do you prefer? And obviously it matters whether it's a lefty or a righty. I get that. That has depended on this lineup to this point. Do you think that's going to be the situation the rest of the season? And then which lineup do you just prefer in general? Because the reason why I ask you this, and I don't think many who are doing post-game shows with every team in baseball are having to ask these questions. You may have different lineups depending on whether it's a righty or lefty, but these are catastrophically different. I mean, this is going from a conventional lineup to like this one, where you're going from speed to your best hitter to Vogaball, who's 270 plus as your cleanup man, previous 30 home run hitter, to the other option to where the guy that hit 30 home runs in the big leagues a few years ago and nobody else has done so leads off for you. So is this going to be the rest of the season? Could we see more of Vogaball in the leadoff hitter the rest of the year? Is that going to be a consistent thing, or are we just feeling it out now? And what lineup do you actually like better and feel more comfortable with if you were evaluating these so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, obviously, majority of the time they're going to be going against right-handed hitters. I think they're like A1 line or right-handed pitchers, I should say. I think their A1 lineup in those situations is going to be Vogelbach leading off.
Okay.
And to me, I think that makes sense because he's not really like, I think people see him and they just assume like he's a big power hitting, like home run guy. He's not really. Like he's a guy who gets on base, he takes good at bats. And
2019 might be the evidence to argue that just that one season, 31 homers, 90 plus RBI. His average was down. It almost was like he became a different guy. That it became Matt Stairs for a season, oddly.
Right. But to me, I think like, I think I would rather have like Key Bryan like at 2 or 3 or whatever, just because, you know, over the whole season, you would expect Key Bryan and Brian Reynolds to be your 2 most consistent hitters, right? And obviously, you know, maybe an O'Neal Cruz throws that off, or maybe Diego Castillo keeps hot. But whatever, like in general, you'd expect those guys to be your 2 best hitters. And so if that's the case, like I'd rather see them like getting up more consistently with runners on base, right? And if Vogelbach can do that, he started the season quite well. Then you know that's okay. Like I'd rather see that, even if he's not the fastest guy in the world. If he's getting on base, whatever that means, I would rather. I guess the way to put it would be I would rather Key Bryan at the plate with Vogelbach on base than Vogelbach at the plate with Key Bryan on base, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and it's just hard for, I guess, my mind to get wrapped around Vogelbach, the leadoff hitter, but I do get it from an analytical standpoint. I do get it from on base. It wasn't working out the first week or so, but now it really certainly has. Average and on-base percentage have been there. But again, unless you point to 2019 and say that only one of these guys you mentioned has had a 90 RBI season in the bigs, and it actually is the man you are going to lead off. So, but that could be more of an aberration. Again, you're also having him be the best consistent on-base percentage guy the last several years. And Hayes, you can't steal first. So, but the best hitters are likely going to be Hayes and Reynolds, you would imagine, the rest of the season. And maybe O'Neal Cruz would throw a monkey wrench into this entire thing if he comes up and actually shows some power that we saw in the spring. Maybe it would set out the lineup. Maybe that would move Vogelbach to the 5, or maybe O'Neal Cruz would be there, or maybe if Vogelbach becomes your leadoff hitter, that's going to be a whole situation on how you would configure that. Obviously, if O'Neal Cruz is actually warranting being a key contributor to your lineup when he comes up, and despite the hype, there's no guarantee of that and when he's going to come up either. I do want to ask you about somebody that was in the Milwaukee Brewers batting order on this evening, and he was hitting cleanup. So he was hitting cleanup. There was no debate there. He actually was the DH hitting cleanup. So he was the Vogelbach of the Milwaukee Brewers in this game, and that is the former MVP of the Pirates, and that is Andrew McCutchen. He ended up signing with Milwaukee. He ends up being a part of Milwaukee and what they maybe were thinking they could do this year in terms of a postseason run. Granted, the record's been the same as the Pirates to this point, and they do win this game. For anybody that kind of wanted him to be a Pirate, that were hoping and praying for that to happen, because there were rumors that maybe he was flirting on Twitter and there were some people that wanted it to happen, and then all of a sudden you wake up one morning, signs with Milwaukee, throws a pin in that balloon, and that's just over. For you, as somebody who's covered the team the last few years, did you ever think there was any validity to that happening, as you're already shaking your head no here? And if he did end up signing with Pittsburgh, how much would that have changed this season? Likely not in terms of wins and losses for this all of a sudden to be a playoff team, but in terms of how they would configure this lineup, what this would do for the maturation process, etc. Or was that just something that wouldn't have worked out, so that's why they didn't even go in that direction? Because it seemed like maybe it was more fans hoping than being legit rumors. But I do have to ask, because it was just out of nowhere that he ended up becoming a Milwaukee Brewer, and that dream was over for some fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just kind of like fan-driven rumors. He was talking to, the other Post-Gazette writer today, Jason Mackey, was caught up with McCutchen today and said the Pirates called him but never offered him anything this offseason. So, that means that they're at least kicking the tires. But
that's more than fans. Then they called him, or his agent or whoever. There was some just to see kind of, okay.
Yeah. So, that is something to me, like, it would have made a lot of sense. Like, I don't know, at some point they're going to have to get a right fielder. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's been, I mean, even Polanco was clearly not a very good defender out there by the time he left. And so outside of him, it's been a ton of right fielders who do not play right field. And obviously, if McCutchen came, then that would have meant making a decision on someone else. So I get it in a sense, but Cole Tucker, he's trying his best out there, and he's probably the best right fielder outside of, they've got Gamble, Marisnick, and Reynolds, and that would be your best defensive outfield. But outside of those guys, I think Tucker's probably the best option. But that's not saying a ton, and it's still not his best position. And it's still guys all over the field that you could say, McCutchen would have been better than 90% of the hitters currently on the Pirates team. And that's it just is how it is. Right. And so, it would have made sense to me, just in a vacuum, but clearly they wanted to, give the guys like Hoyt Park and Michael Chavis and Cole Tucker and Kevin Newman some run, and Dio Castillo for that matter. And give them an opportunity. Because, to me, the way I think of it also is if McCutchen had signed, then they probably wouldn't have gone and gotten Marisnick, or they wouldn't have gone and gotten Vogelbach. There would have been something else subtracted from it. But in my opinion, Kutch is better than those guys anyways. Right. So,
yeah. On the field as a player right now, he would be the best of that bunch, and would likely be the third best player on this team right now if you put him behind Hayes and Reynolds, just because of the points in their career, and then depending on what O'Neill Cruz maybe would do. I mean, you would figure McCutchen kind of was even underrated during that Philly run when he was healthy with the Phillies. Yeah. So, he would be a productive player. I always had the unpopular opinion that I almost was secretly happy to see him go with maybe a team that would contend, because I didn't see it making too much sense for him. If I was his agent or friend and said him, the Pittsburgh welcoming would be great. And I know you named your kid Steele, but why, if you don't have to come back to the Pirates right now, they're still in the midst of this rebuild process. There's no secret. They're still a year or two away, if not 3 or 4. It didn't seem make sense for him. And it almost seems like that maybe he kind of knew that too, that it was, I don't know how much it was a legit thing that he was thinking about or wanted to happen either, outside of some tweets in that direction from his camp, maybe just to keep the friendship in existence, but this wasn't really going to happen on either side.
Well, it might have been, it might have been the kind of thing where they called and he said, "No, I'm good. I'm going to go to a contender somewhere too."
Yeah. So, and they're not going to say that. They're just going to let it go.
Right.
That could be possibly a situation as well, because you would think that if there was some legitimacy there, and there was a phone call, there might have been some offer discussed. Maybe they're not willing to admit there was one, but you would think something would go somewhere here. Mike Persak joining me. The Pirates do lose this one. Andrew McCutchen gets the victory. The Brewers win it 6-1, and the Pirates now back to 500 at 5-5. Now, going into game 2 of this series, back to the House of Horrors, Pirates trying it again against the Brew Crew. This will be game 2, and it'll be JT Brubaker back on the mound, 0-1 on the year, a 9.82 ERA to this point. So unlike the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for Zach Thompson, where it's been good and then not good enough and a little bit worse, and you're kind of waiting to see how he could get himself out of this, a more veteran starter in Brubaker, who started the year as the quote unquote top of the rotation, and it's just been bad to this point. How much pressure is on him to have a legit quality start and pitch well, whether it's literally quality, because pitchers rarely get through the 5th inning anymore anyway, is immaterial, but is there pressure on him to legitimately pitch well, that he himself has pitched well enough to win no matter what the team does, in order to keep this spot for him in the rotation, or just in general? It's been kind of, last year he started out hot and then faded, but this year it's been really bad early, which I'd imagine adds some more concern to a guy that at least was supposed to stabilize things at the top of the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, I think he just has to stop walking guys. He's got 7 walks early and 7 in the 3rd inning. And last year he had 38 walks all season in 124 in the 3rd innings. That was his thing, is he wasn't wild. He didn't give guys free passes. They had to earn it against him. And he's just walking too many guys right now. And so he's got to get that under control. In terms of his status, so the interesting part about the Pirates pitching right now, obviously, is how they're handling their starters and sort of that piggyback, like long reliever and all that. And so with that being said, the only reason I bring that up is that like, even if he struggles, I don't really think he's in any danger of like losing it. Like, maybe if it gets bad enough, they put him in one of those long reliever spots, right? And they try something new with that, or they put an opener in front of him or something.
Would they
like that,
shake up the rotation at all? Because I know it's not as big of a deal, and whether you're the legit one of the staff or a 3-4 in the top 5 of the staff, especially if you don't really have an ace on your staff, and they do not. But would they shake it up and have him, quote unquote, miss a start and then ends up where he slots different in the rotation before they go to long relief? And we have seen them. I mean, Will Crowe now seems to fit in perfectly as a reliever. They have shaken it up to that respect, and they're still waiting for Mitch Keller to really show them something. That hype is still a debate right now. So while I get your point that nobody's stabilized anything enough to have it be something that you're concerned with losing, but how much longer do you just let this go, or do you try to figure something else out with him, or maybe a less pressure scenario that's not trying to be the quote unquote stopper or starter of a series?
Right. And I guess that's just sort of another option, right? Like that, right. That's another thing that they could do with all the guys that are up. Like, if Brubaker really struggles or whatever, and they want to skip him in the rotation, well, that's okay. You can put Ronzi Contreras in for a start or whatever, and then move it back. Like you can try a bunch of different things and just kind of see what fits. And that's sort of the beauty of what they're doing, is that they just have so many options and so many ways to attack opposing lineups, because there's a bunch of guys who are capable of eating a bunch of innings. And it could be 2 or 3 of them that are fresh on any given turn in the rotation, right? So I wouldn't say that I know exactly what they're gonna do, because they've kind of hinted that they're gonna try a lot of different things. But I would say that also tells me that nothing's really off the table. They might try any number of things if guys continue to struggle,
Right. And I think it's pretty clear this is a season that is still clearly where they're trying to figure things out, figure out who's going to be a part of the future, figure out what value they can get for guys. And if they can get value for a myriad of guys, that'd be a big plus, because the concern entering this season was there wasn't, if you legitimize Hayes and Reynolds as part of your future, then you don't have anyone else to get value for, try to add to them. That's a concern for some. Maybe they could figure something else out if they get guys to play above themselves like they are right now, and at least play well or better than they've been in recent years to the deadline. That might help things, but this is still clearly a year or 2, if not 3 years away. What I do want to ask you here before we close up shop, since it's the first time we've had you on, and you've been on the beat and you're kind of maybe in tune with this team as much as any guest I could have on would be. You mentioned your colleague as well as someone I also could certainly ask there in Mackey, but was there any surprise for you that Reynolds did receive an extension, that he did end up signing an extension? Because a week or 2 earlier, he was in rumors of being traded. There obviously were rumors before the season as well, and that's been a polarizing debate on whether he would be around and how long. Once Hayes got his, what has really been said to be a team-friendly extension that does lock him up as that piece. Was there any surprise for you that happened for a couple more years for Reynolds? And what is the difference of his deal in terms of Hayes, in comparison to Hayes, outside the money, in terms of their feeling about him? Because it was not a 7-8 year, I'm locking you up for a decade type of thing, but it was almost giving the fans a feeling of, okay, this guy's not going to be traded this year. Is that a correct assessment or feeling, or maybe still not with how the deal looks?
So basically, to me, like, what this deal says is just that they wanted to avoid an arbitration hearing. They didn't want to go to that. And those are the reports that we've gotten at the Post-Gazette too, is that in fact Bob Nutting was upset with it when they couldn't come to an agreement. He was upset about how that made them look in terms of like treating their best player with some sort of, like,
I mean, we talked about it here on my show here. I mean, you're fighting over $300,000. It almost appeared.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
It looked bad. That's a bad look.
Yeah. So to me, that's kind of what this is. I have seen the point made by multiple people on the national level and whatever, that this actually makes a player more tradable.
Okay.
In that it provides like a team who would want to buy him now has cost certainty, right? Where it's like, okay, next year I will be paying him this. as opposed to having to go to arbitration with them and whatever on their own end. But it doesn't on the surface, it doesn't really change anything to me. Like it doesn't guarantee that he's here past arbitration, which is really the only thing that matters. The timeline is still the same. Yeah. The only positive is that, Reynolds feels better about not having to go to arbitration and hear the team tell a moderator, why they should pay him less money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And from the Pirates' perspective, they don't have to go and do that. They don't have to haggle with their best player. They can have like a positive working relationship. And the hope now, I think, from the Pirates' end is that they get this done. They appease Reynolds for this year. They let him know, like, hey, we value you enough to pay you for the next couple of years at least. Certainly pay you more than they would have had to pay him this year. And then they hope some of that goodwill like sparks some further conversations down the road. But in terms of just this deal, I don't really think it changes anything in terms of his status or tradability or anything like that.
Yeah, and it is a fair point that it does make him potentially more attractive to others. And granted, if you're a big market team and you're looking at him for a postseason run, you might not have cared about arbitration. Right. But just in general, it opens up the doors. That is, the Minnesota Twins could get in play now, for example. They're a team that's unlike that, or they're a small market team. That teams that want to add him but don't necessarily want to just overpay and throw cash around.
Right.
Maybe have some security, and it does open up those doors. So that is definitely something to think about as well. And it also does, as you mentioning, I think this is big too, because the perception of that was just really bad, especially in the midst of maybe a team-friendly deal with Hayes, where, okay, you kind of got like you did with McCutchen, who we mentioned, okay, if you think he's going to be a star, he might not be there forever, but you get him on a deal that whenever he gets to a peak level that everyone thinks he can reach, if he's healthy enough, it'll end up being a bargain for you. Like McCutchen was at a bargain when he was MVP, but that was a concern that not only if you have to trade Reynolds is one thing, but to argue over a couple $100,000 just was a bad look for the Pirates that I don't know how anyone could even probably have massaged in interviews. And that probably was what annoyed Nutting so much. So I do get that. And that maybe is a win. Also, if you have to have Reynolds still here next year because you don't get enough in terms of value and Cherington doesn't like a deal, doesn't have to be awkward at the workplace. Probably would have been awkward at the workplace. Otherwise there. Well, Mike, I definitely appreciate the time. We'll definitely have you back on and maybe you'll become good luck for some fans here. They might, I don't know. You're my favorite guest on, but I don't know if that'll be the case to this point here based on the recent snide that is now the recent streak that has now become maybe a snide. We'll see. Milwaukee's certainly not a good luck charm for the Pirates. They do lose this one 6-1. They do lose this opening game of this series after winning a series against the Nationals. And Andrew McCutchen does get a victory over the Pirates, but it is Brubaker on the mound. So more pressure, more things to see from him and see if the Pirates can now make this not a losing streak in game 2 of this series. Pittsburgh now back to 500, losing this 6-1. Mike Persak of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So go follow him and find his coverage over there. And we'll be back with you another post-game show at some point here the rest of this series or maybe beyond here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. And, of course, Pittsburgh Baseball.